to the 13th recording of the PBC Morning Dawn webcast from Padma Samiling, Khenpo Rinpoche's Monastery and Retreat Center in New York. Today we'll be discussing the 13th chapter of Rinpoche's books called The Buddhist Path, which is known as the 5 Supports of Meditation. So we'll begin with our usual opening prayers and then we'll go to the discussion. Well, thanks so much. Samantabhadra, Vajrasattva, Paramanavajra, Sri Singha, Padmakara, the 25 king and subjects, So, Zor, Nun, Yang, and the 100 Tirtans and others, Lamas of the Kama and Terma lineages, to you I pray. The supreme tradition of the glorious Buddha Padmasambhava, which is the essential, extraordinary view and doctrine of the early translation school, you keep alive and spread by the light of wisdom. Lord of Dharma, great Khenpo, I pray at your lotus feet. In the palace of the Ogman Dharmadhatu, the essence of all the Buddhas of the 3 times, the one who shows clearly the Dharmakaya of my own mind, we pray to the Honorable Root Guru, glorious root teacher, precious one, dwelling on the lotus seat on the crown of my head. Hold me with your great kindness, and bestow the accomplishments of body, speech, and mind. Om Marabasanadi, Om Marabasanadi, Om Marabasanadi, Om Marabasanadi, Om Marabasanadi, Om So we begin this chapter 13, which starts on page 65 in the Buddhist Path. And I'll give a quick summary of the first half or so of the chapter. And so Khenpo Rinpoche's begin this chapter saying that in order to actualize our potential for enlightenment or Buddhahood, we have to meditate. And that the Buddha taught that we can achieve this enlightenment with 5 supports. The first is joyful effort, then mindfulness, devotion, concentration, and wisdom. They go on to say, with joyful interest and ongoing effort, meditation practice will bring good results. If we enjoy what we're doing, we will want to continue doing it. And the best type of effort is steady and smooth like a river. It is important not to expect immediate results. When you begin practicing, it's best to meditate frequently for short periods of time and gradually increase the length of time as your practice grows. And regardless of how long we meditate for, we have to meditate with mindfulness. As we meditate, thoughts will naturally arise, but we have to be aware of them when they do and not become distracted. We must gently but firmly bring our mind back to itself without following the thoughts. It is very important to meditate with the right motivation, which is devotion and bodhicitta. We have devotion to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who have fully realized their potential and become enlightened. And we wish to become like them, fully realize our own potential as well, so we can help all beings. We develop this devotion and take refuge in the 3 jewels, and in Vajrayana in the 3 roots, the Guru, Deity, and Dakini. And by cultivating devotion, we become very interested in receiving their guidance, applying it in our lives, and directly revealing our own hidden Buddha nature. And through our devotion, we receive their blessings and thus gain the strength and support to continue on the path through all the difficulties and obstacles that we'll face. Devotion, like Rinpoche's go on to say, devotion is the key which opens the door of enlightenment, and with devotion, our joyful effort will naturally increase. They then talk about concentration, saying that concentration means continually maintaining an unmoving focus. Concentration brings calmness and peace of mind. Since our minds are not settled, they're moving around and unstable, so we need concentration. And then the fifth power is wisdom, which naturally emerges from the first four powers, or supports. This wisdom has two aspects, relative and absolute. Relative truth is how things appear. Absolute truth is the way things are. We use logical inference to understand the relationality of phenomena, but inference cannot fully express the absolute nature, since it must be directly experienced with non-dual wisdom awareness. Duality mind grasps at objects, while non-dual wisdom awareness experiences everything as its own intangible, illusory display. Wisdom clearly sees both the differences between relative and absolute truth, as well as how they're inseparably united. So this is the first half or so of the chapter, and then we'll go around and each read more or less a definition of each of these five supports.
All beings have the potential for Buddhahood. In order to actualize this potential, we need to meditate. The best supports for meditation practice are 1. Joyful effort, 2. Mindfulness, 3. Devotion, 4. Concentration, and 5. Wisdom. The Buddha taught that we can actualize enlightenment with these 5 supports.
Joyful effort. When you meditate, first you need to apply joyful and continuous effort. In any activity, you need a certain amount of motivation to finish what you start. If you experience joy in what you're doing, then you will want to continue. The opposite of joyful effort is laziness, or feeling dull and heavy.
Okay, and then page 66, first full paragraph, and page 69, second full paragraph. Mindfulness. For whatever amount of time you meditate, even for 5 or 10 minutes, try to maintain your mind single-pointedly, without being distracted by thoughts. Mindfulness means paying attention to the main focus of the meditation, as well as to the supports of devotion, effort, concentration, and so forth. Mindfulness means not forgetting what you are doing, but being clear and focused. The opposite of mindfulness is forgetfulness. Forgetfulness happens because the mind is moving so fast. The mind is somewhat like a strainer that cannot keep water from flowing out.
Number 3, devotion, page 66, the third full paragraph, and the last paragraph on page 68. Devotion to the highly realized beings such as Buddha Shakyamuni, Guru Padmasambhava, or Tara means that you feel close to them and wish to attain the same ability they have to help all sentient beings. Devotion is feeling great interest in their realization and longing to have the same realization as soon as you can. The opposite of devotion is the absence of interest in clear thinking about spiritual practice. People who lack devotion see only the ordinary objects right in front of them. Their vision of the deeper levels of reality is obscured.
Number 4, concentration. From page 67, last paragraph, page 68, the first paragraph, and page 69, the last paragraph. Concentration means continually maintaining an unmoving focus. Generally, our minds are darting about and unstable. Concentration naturally brings calmness and peace of mind. The opposite of concentration is distraction.
Number 5, wisdom. Page 68, first and second full paragraphs. Page 70, first full paragraph. The fifth power, wisdom, naturally emerges from practicing the first 4 powers. One way to understand wisdom is to divide it into its 2 aspects, relative and absolute. Relatively, we directly perceive objects through seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. We apply inference when we think about them. These are aspects of relative wisdom. When we examine phenomena closely, we see that they exist in an illusionary way, like a mirage, a dream, or the reflection of the moon in water. Recognition of the illusionary nature of phenomena is absolute wisdom. The opposite of wisdom is ignorance. Ignorance is like the darkness caused by wearing a hat that completely covers our head so that we cannot see anything.
Okay, I had a question that's maybe a little bit obvious, but so they describe joyful effort as something that needs to be like ideally slow and kind of steady like a river. And then the second one, mindfulness, they said that generally, our mind is moving so fast and it has the monkey mind. So how do we get from, if we do have that monkey mind, how do we get to a place where we can cultivate this slow and steady, joyful effort so that we can get on the cushion and engage in these 5 aspects of meditation?
I think it has a lot to do with just getting that physical support. Just actually giving yourself the time to be on the cushion. I particularly remember the first the few times that I sat down in just strict, just kind of watching your breath meditation, and it's really painful in that way of, wow, I didn't realize how much I was kind of like all over the place. Or like other times you sit down and within the range of like 20 minutes you can watch this just whole like drama of emotions just completely erupt. And it's definite, and just having that physical commitment, having that commitment. I'm going to sit, I'm going to let all of this, erupt for the next at least 20 minutes, and I'm going to keep sitting with it. You make that commitment. I find that the physical support is one of those things that's, absolutely, there's so many teachings that need to be applied, but I think having that commitment, taking that time to give yourself that physical support, and setting aside that time, is what comes to mind for me.
And it seems, I'm sorry. Seems like too, once we give ourselves the opportunity, we have the vision of the teachings and what we're doing, and we actually begin to experience, like you mentioned, when we first start to sit down, then the spotlight kind of shines and we see more clearly how busy and wild and kind of flitting our minds can be. But then not to be, discouraged by that, but to know that that's part of the process, and keep that wider vision of like, well, what's really keeping our goal in mind, and keeping, so many different supports. All of these are supports for the meditation, but also just, the presence and the blessings of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and remembering our teachers, and, all these beautiful examples that we can see just kind of in the relationship of that, or we might be aware of how wild our mind is. Because I think for that, then that is also letting us see long term, not just like right now how we're feeling, but seeing over a period of time what our goal is, and looking at like the examples of the masters, great lineage masters, and seeing what they've gone through in their lives. So it's not like these little things come up, whether they're inside feelings or outside uncomfortableness, but that kind of long-term vision of, from now until enlightenment, and seeing that, and that kind of thing, like that dichotomy, that balance between, I think what you're getting at, right, is that balance of seeing how wild and active our mind is, and like bursting forth, but then kind of how Rinpoche's here, as far as the joyful effort, are kind of emphasizing keeping that long-term goal, long-term vision, really big vision, not only thinking of ourselves, but all the beings, and just always trying to maintain for the long run our practice. It's like, like maybe if you think about an example like in a marathon or something, if we've never run a marathon or we decide we're going to train to jog or something, or like lift weights, or and we just like go out and we like run as fast as we can, as hard as we can, we're not going to, and we've never done it before, we're not going to get very far, and we might be discouraged and just drop it. But like keeping that long-term vision and being real about our current capacities, but keeping our aspiration wide, it seems like that's a big part of that balance.
I think working with your breath is really helpful because it's very simple, it's always there, and there's a relationship between your breathing and how restless your mind is. So I find for myself that it's really useful to count or be aware of my breathing.
And it seems like too that just like both of y'all said, but like Lodra said too, to just actually sit, you know, just sit down, you know, in a place, because these 5 things, like, it's an interesting dichotomy between having so many thoughts and being distracted, and then there's so many aspects, and there's so many like devotion and all these other things, and it can like seem so big, I think, to some people, or at least to me. I know that I can have that, just a lot of like, there's a whole package that goes with it, but sometimes I think if that is the case, or I find that with myself, even just to just sit down, and then my mind naturally, you know, it's like, that's part of it. Sometimes that's even the hardest thing, just, I mean, for...
Just to start.
Just to start, just to sit.
And it's all, I mean, I think it's good to remember, all this is just a gradual process.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of in one way, it's like, what other choice do we have? What have we ever experienced in this life that we just got instantly, and we are perfect at it, you know? It's all gradual. Any training takes time. And then what other option do we have but deal with our own mind? Every minute we have our mind. There's nothing we can do to not have our mind right now. So that's just like a straightforward teaching in the Buddha. Like, we always have this mind, every instant. We have to deal with it at some point if we want to feel better, if we don't want to go through so much trouble. And then at the same time, like, we're not just this tight, racing mind. Like, it goes to this point of joyful effort. This type of laziness we have where we're self-defeating because we don't really pay attention to the goodness qualities we have. We only see the superficial, surface level things. And so we just say, oh, I'm no good, can't do, or oh, this is too hard, or I'm too busy. A big point of joyful effort is seeing that it's not just this tight, grasping mind we have, but there is this deeper nature, this Buddha nature, like it's the first line of the chapter. All beings have the potential for Buddhahood. In order to actualize this potential, we need to meditate. Like, it's all about revealing that nature. So the view is all in the sense of we're revealing that nature. So to some degree, we have to connect to, we have to realize, I have a mind happening now, and there is some degree of being able to change what my mind does. And there's this deeper level of awareness or of goodness, of heartfelt ability that we have, that when we tap into it again and again, then we can grow it. We can reveal it more, however we put that. And then like trying to say, okay, well, how do I do that? Well, I have to calm down first, to get a posture, I have to breathe, all these other things that Rinpoche's have outlined in these previous chapters. And then I have to, well, what is my mind doing in practice? And here are the points. What's the motivation? What's the technique? Am I doing the technique? Am I doing it with tight grasping mind? Or am I doing it more with a wisdom mind? Like, it's more or less, it's a framework for how to, in a session or in our daily lives, approach.
That's the mindfulness aspect.
Yeah, I mean, the mindfulness is, what am I doing right now? What's happening right now? Anchoring it in this present moment of awareness, because that's where we always are. I mean, it's not, it's profound. Like this one, I mean, a point that really struck me in this chapter was, I think it was also it was later on in the chapter about, it was also related to this joyful effort, this laziness. We need to really it struck me, make a strong impression of our minds in what is meaningful to me. What is meaningful to me? What is the main thing? Where is my main overarching goal? Like Lai was saying, large view. In my life, what do I really want to do with my life? To really make that a repeated impression, like a strong pattern in the mind. Like, and that's a joyful effort, and that's an awareness, mindfulness. Am I connecting to that deeper meaning in my life? with my family and with my time and job and practice. Because without that, we're all just going to get swarmed and overwhelmed with everything that happens in a life, in a day. But that deep, really trying to connect to that naturalness of ourselves with that, really kind of trying to refresh again and again. What do I want to do with today? Where am I going to kind of try to aim my life? And then in that context, this brings on much kind of deeper sense of wanting to understand it and try to apply it too. It's tough, yeah. Seen as like a bag of techniques or as a big jumble of things is hard. That's why we're so fortunate with Khenpo Rinpoches and Mipham Rinpoche, all these lineage masters, Longchenpa and Guru Rinpoche and Buddha. So many lineage masters have distilled essential study points and essential practice points in a way that doesn't leave anything out, but we just have to apply them. These are like Rinpoches have said, with Samayas or Vinaya, they're just guidelines, these expert tips that these realized beings are I know you might not believe me now, but do these 3 things, and it'll really help everything, And that's that devotion of trying to just take their advice more than our own personal monkey mind, little individualistic, narcissistic, arrogant, short-term, ordinary object-focused awareness. What are the people with the vaster view? What did they say?
Yeah. And what did they realize too? Of course, but that aspect of devotion, how we've talked about effort and being really that mindfulness and vigilance, but then also with that balance of devotion's not separate from those things, but I don't know, in my experience, it seems like too, devotion has that aspect where with our joyful effort and with our mindfulness, or looking at, the qualities of Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, of the lineage masters and everything, then there's that inspiration to our mind, but there's also a certain level where we just have that natural part of the path that's just soft-hearted and just opening, just being open and receptive to something beyond that we feel so close in our heart and we recognize so deep in our heart, but we're at the same time able to maybe drop some of our harder habitual patterns and things that maybe block that, either conceptually or on whatever levels. The way that part of devotion, that's that adoration and the longing and that openness and closeness feeling where we can relax. It's as much as it's so warm and rising and longing, it's also that sense of warmth and openness and relaxing too, and being at ease, and that's it's very dynamic too. But there's so many aspects to devotion, but it seems especially that part of how it really opens us to the blessings. It helps us expand, a kind of more contracted sense of who we are and what our potential is. It can help, just really give more breadth and space to recognize, maybe where mistakes we're making, as well as affirming in those inner goodness qualities too, by seeing them, of course, in others, and just there's more to say.
And it's interesting that you bring up the multiple facets of devotion. There was something that really caught me about what Rinpoche was saying here, when you're looking at the part on devotion, it talks about how devotion to highly realized beings such as Buddha, Shakyamuni, Guru, Padmasambhava, or Tara means that you feel close to them and wish to attain the same ability that they have to help all sentient beings. And I just remember reading over that and going, isn't that refuge and bodhicitta right there?
Mm-hmm.
Apparently the phone agrees.
Yes.
But and just something about that. I never even thought of it that way, in that sense, how cultivating that devotion, and how many teachings have we been to, and everyone that I can remember, Rinpoche always starts with this refuge, bodhicitta, standing firm on in confidence in the view, and then from there, with that view, knowing that you're going to do this for the sake of all sentient beings. It just really fascinated me too, that how, it just, it all just kind of sizzles in that devotion.
And I think a big part of the sizzling is this, in a more like practical sense. When we like stir fry something really hot, we do it quickly. Keep it fresh, like kind of a little zap, Like in here in these teachings, Guru Rinpoche, they quote Guru Rinpoche saying as one of his final teachings in Tibet, these like short sessions many times. Like all this is it's so big if we try to take it on all at once and like have to be the big accomplish something of all this all at once. But if we can connect to a simple thing, a good experience we've had, some like deeper balanced side of ourselves, a good intention of wanting to help someone else, and just in a minute or 2 minutes, bring that motivation, relax into it like you're saying, that's so important to just let it be there and circulate. And then do, like really to integrate, just really short, but very kind of genuine. I think it's such a profound instruction that all these great masters have said that instruction, but to really like kind of bring like that devotion and bring it up and let it be there, and then do the next thing we're doing in our lives. I think so many masters have said it's good, especially in the beginning, for the practice sessions, for our mind to really like them. Like because we have grasping mind, we're just starting so strong grasping, we need to grasp on practice. Especially in the beginning. Like, it needs to be a pleasurable thing. It needs to be something we want to do. It needs to be seen as a way out, as like, there's a path, Like, so we keep it fresh, keep it short, like, don't string it out and try to add on all this stuff, and then at the end we feel like, we hope the session's done. Gosh, there's so much, Because then that's another habit, and then we say, oh, maybe I won't practice because it was so much. Just...
That's a crucial point when I started practicing, that several people said, like, one, that no matter how complicated it can be, and if you break it down, there's many aspects, but the conundrum is not really knowing the nature of minds or all these things that you hear about at first. So if maybe you don't have that much experience, but if you can connect with these feelings that you have of love or relaxation, and with that, realize that, like this one meditator told me one time, it's the most natural thing you could ever do. Relax, sit still, and look at your own mind. There's nothing more basic, aside from breathing, or, as far as, it's just such a natural, basic thing. And then the other thing that really helped me, especially when I was just starting out, which I still am, but said, like you said, stop while you're ahead. Quit while you're ahead. Like, don't, once you sit down, you engage in the practice, you have mindfulness, it's still juicy, it's a short session, then dedicate the merit, and make that a session. And like, I know, we used to joke, like, how many times when somebody said, oh, that meditation was so great, I just kept meditating and meditating, it was so wonderful, and I just kept going and going. And then you're like, watch out tomorrow, like, especially during retreat, because then it's like, oh, so many obstacles, because it's too, I've just seen that dozens, if not hundreds of times. Oh, that was so good, so I just kept going, instead of just like, slow, like steady, It's like, because all of a sudden you're like, well, I meditated so much last time that like, maybe I don't need to meditate this time. Or anyway, it's just, I was just thinking of these basic points, how natural it is, how important and helpful it can be to not force yourself to sit for an hour and be miserable, and then the next time you're like, okay, I'm going to go sit and be miserable again, but not necessarily the most helpful, especially in the beginning, like you were saying. Of course, ultimately, meditation will help uproot all our habit patterns, which means there's going to be a lot of bumps in the road, because our habit patterns are so entrenched that when you look to your mind and your habits, you find habits that you don't necessarily like, that aren't necessarily pleasant. Otherwise, why would you sit in the practice in the first place? If everything was perfectly fine that you experienced in your life right now, what's the impetus to work with that and change, you know? So.
And I think part of the devotion aspect, and as one of these points, is like refuge in three jewels: Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. One of which is Sangha. Like, not only do we need to try to, in our own lives, in a daily way, to like have some kind of time set aside to cultivate a good pattern of just checking in with ourselves, being mindful, kind of trying to apply our techniques. But it's really so special and important to check in with other people, other Sangha members, going through, getting together, kind of learning together, studying the Dharma together, practicing together some, like inspiring one another, helping one another, being there for each other. I mean, I think so much is that, and like at the end of this chapter, they say that defining characteristic of ignorance is we feel so separate. Like that Sangha of like coming together, like developing these connections that are so meaningful and just so profound, based on really these such good, pure intentions. And then really, I mean, it's such a vital support, and it's clearly, like, in this chapter, this devotion and three jewels. Like, Sangha is definitely one of the three jewels. I think it's so essential and so valuable. And I think it's also one of those things that's most seen when you get to have the privilege of being around, like, Dharma brothers and sisters, too. Kind of like a big experience. It's like, wow, I didn't know I was kind of missing this in a way. But some people have a strong longing, really know they need it, because to be around supportive people that aren't constantly at odds with their vision of goodness and love and trying to do good things.
Because you talk, I mean, I don't know if everyone has the same experience, but I definitely remember, you know, before I came here, it was really hard because you'd sit down and you'd have that moment of mindfulness, you'd be reading something really beautiful, some kind of teaching, and then you'd walk out your door and everyone's being rude, and I mean, like, on one level it's like, okay, great, I get to practice this, but can I have some support in my practice here, you know, rather than having to retreat back to my room and, you know, go back to the book like, oh wait, there's goodness, okay, cool. Yeah. You know, it's really beneficial to actually, you know, be with people who actually, you know, put that emphasis on, you know, the practices, having that you know, that support of having a practice buddy. Like, I mean, I was terrible at doing my Nandro practices, but then I got a Nandro buddy, you know, and, you know, it keeps me honest. I end up at 6 in the morning, you know.
And of course, too, like the part of, I mean, of course, we're kind of emphasizing, you know, our Sangha brothers and sisters. And, I mean, of course, just to actually be in the living presence of great, you know, living master too, and teacher, and receive, like, receive teachings and, like, their blessings, and just to witness their expression in this world. I mean, of course, I mean, that's inseparable. That's Sangha do. But just how much too, even for a Sangha community who is, you know, kind of all students of, you know, great masters such as Kenshin Palden, Sherab Rinpoche, or Khenpo Sebon Dongyo Rinpoche. I mean, our teachers. There's, I mean, of course, so many levels of like just the greatness, and such a beautiful opportunity, and such major support. I mean, yeah, of course, without our teachers, without the lineage, without the Buddha coming into this world, I mean, all. But, and then we're talking about meditation too. I mean, I guess maybe we're in the section of the book where we're talking about meditation and actually applying it as the path to what the focus of the whole book is, you know, just becoming more and more familiar with the primordial nature, or revealing our primordial nature, knowing things exactly as it is the path of meditation. Or like, you know, the first sentence, revealing our own Buddha nature and become enlightened on behalf of just is so simple in a way, just how each one of these things, it's so amazing how they all cross over and interlink and support each other. I mean, but kind of, I guess the main thing people think about with meditation sometimes is more, I mean, with meditation is maybe the first connotation is that aspect of like concentration or something, being quiet. So it's, I don't know, I think it's interesting, all these other aspects that really create such good conditions, you know, for realizing that nature. I'm just speaking, you know, that's all.
And I think all these are natural qualities of our mind.
Yeah.
Like these great bodhisattvas have so much joyful effort. They have such clear, present, anchored awareness that's so fresh, so devoted. They're just so humble. They're just so much honor to these great wisdom beings in the lineage. Then of course their samadhi and their abilities that have come from that samadhi are so clearly demonstrated again and again in their lives. And obviously their wisdom, being able to sensitively engage with so many beings in such an all-inclusive way that's so balanced, so impartial, and yet so sensitive and exacting. I mean, these are like natural wisdom abilities that comes from like accomplishing like meditation in this full sense, like fully embodying their nature, their humanness, or their mind, like what the mind can do when it's fully engaged with itself and its surroundings. So how about, real quick, we'll see when the mind isn't fully engaged with its surroundings. Rinpoche's in this chapter go through the opposites of each of these points really quickly, just to be a little complete with this. I say the opposite of devotion is an absence of interest and clear thinking about spiritual practice. We see nothing more subtle than the ordinary objects around us, so we can't progress in revealing our own hidden qualities either. Now the opposite of joyful effort is laziness. There's 3 types. 1, we're just lazy and we put off practice till later. Secondly, we're overcome by our usual habits and we don't practice. Thirdly, we're hard on ourselves and we ignore our goodness qualities, so we don't practice. And so all laziness results in not practicing and thus not progressing or not revealing more of our own goodness qualities and seeing them in others. Third, the opposite of mindfulness is forgetfulness. We don't spend enough time clearly thinking about what is important, so we neglect what is deeply meaningful to us. We need to firmly imprint in our mind what is truly important and maintain this awareness over time. Then the opposite of concentration is distraction. We're distracted by external objects, and we're distracted by internal imaginations or projections, emotions, thoughts. By strengthening and indulging in these distractions, it really becomes a big problem, and we must firmly work to keep our practice focused while we're meditating. And then finally, the opposite of wisdom is ignorance. And ignorance means not knowing emptiness, which is the true nature of things. We have a strong inclination to feel separate, which creates my ego, and what's not my ego is everyone else's egos. And so all these relationships between my ego and others' egos creates all kinds of hope and fear. And then by uprooting this ignorance and this grasping, we experience the great equanimity. So that was the second half of this chapter. Are there any final thoughts?
I had one question. They say another form of laziness is being hard on yourself and ignoring your good qualities. Like, to me, that doesn't seem like laziness. It seems like something else, more like a negative attitude. But and the other 2 part, I could see how they were laziness. I didn't see how that was.
I think the result is the same, which causes it to be laziness. We don't think we're good. We don't think we can develop much. Or we're too busy. I don't have time. That's another way of being lazy. Because in the end, it means we don't practice. Like they say, I mean, a great master, Sogya Rinpoche said there's a Eastern laziness and Western laziness. Eastern laziness is let's have tea, oh let's have more tea, oh let's have some more tea. We kind of keep putting off the main point. Western laziness is no time for tea, no time for tea, no time for tea. So in the end, we put off our practice. One is a kind of little dull, and the other's a little too busy. But the end result's the same. We don't do what's meaningful to ourselves. Like we put it off. That's why it's laziness.
And I mean, on that same note too, like, suspending our disbelief for just a little bit is so necessary. Like, if we're not at the end of the path, we don't realize that we have all these qualities necessarily yet, then we have to provisionally have some degree of faith and leave some space in our minds to let our normal way of seeing ourselves as, like, you know, bad and all these things, we have to, like, suspend that for just long enough to sit and reinvigorate a different habit pattern and reconnect with a new aspect of ourselves, you know. So I just think it,
yeah. And sometimes I think, you know, if you think too, like, if you kind of put yourself in another situation, we surely should conclude soon, but like in response to Kate's question, like that part, think about, like, if somebody else was telling us, oh, you can't do that, you're not good enough to do that, I mean, maybe we'd feel a little more like, what do you mean? but it's like something, that same kind of energy, but it's just closer, and we just kind of take it more, just like whatever our other habits for not doing something might be. It's just, it seems like all these levels of laziness are just different ways in which we avoid engaging with what we love. You know, no matter, we're just all different kind of excuses we can use that are good, that work for us. You know, that either keep us from just starting altogether, never even beginning to even try to start to practice, or when we're there, just getting so distracted we never really progress very much, or, you know, block it. Or we have a lot to say about these things, but we've kind of run out of time for tonight.
alas.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone enjoys too, thinking about these and discussing other groups happening. We'll just dedicate the merit and just a moment of silence. Om Swasti Vijayantu Josum Sasum Jitu Benmajum Ningde Sode Tuje Tujinji Kimchim Baden Shira Tupeku Yonjun Dendro Zezan Dajin Om Swasti Shuku Nanda Lungu Chenrezi Tuku Bajum Yagyum Tujetu Vila Pasam Jajo Yansika Tendor Pende Dundu Nyujasho Gandri Rawe Korwe Jinkamsu Bendang Dewa Manu Juene Chenrezi Wa Tenzin Jamsohi Shabe Kaje Badu Tenjoji Om Swasti Sewa Grixin Bebe Jinlamji Dungi Dupe Laksan Nordema Sheru Kolo Sumji Bajote Sanchen Natam Jole Nam Jasho. By this merit may all obtain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara may I free all beings. The precious bodhicitta, and those without it may it be generated. In those who have it may it never diminish, but always continue increasing.